discuss a little bit about the Mitzvah of Talmud Torah, the Mitzvah of studying and learning Torah. So, the Gedolei Achronim, Rav Aaron Kotler, Rav Yisrael Salanter, the Shulchan Aruch Harav, and many others have the same yesod, same foundation when it comes about the mitzvah of Limud Torah. We know in general when it comes to any mitzvah or most mitzvahs, you have what they call the Maisa HaMitzvah. That's the act of shaking the lulav, the act of eating the matzah, the act of sitting in the sukkah, the act of putting on tefillin. Most mitzvahs usually involve the Maisa Mitzvah. However, they point out, in addition to the Maisa Mitzvah, sitting and studying Torah, opening up a Chumash and learning, opening up a Gemara and learning, is what they call the Mitzvah of Yedias HaTorah. There's a mitzvah on every one of us to acquire as much Torah knowledge as possible. So there's the Maisa HaLimud as well as the Yedias HaTorah. And in fact, as the Beis HaLevi writes, based on a Gemara, that Talmud Torah is greater than all other mitzvahs, in the sense that when you're doing a mitzvah, you're protected at the time of the mitzvah. The mitzvah protects you, or with the halach of Tashmishe mitzvah, that only when you're using the mitzvah does it have its kedusha. But once you're finished with it, in theory, nizrakan, you could throw out. But by Talmud Torah, even after you finish learning, the Torah protects you. Why? Because of the Yedias HaTorah. Hopefully you're taking the Torah with you and applying it in your everyday life, and therefore the Torah is greater than other mitzvahs in the sense that not only does it protect you while you're learning, but the impact of the Torah you take with you all the time, and therefore protects you well after you've finished the actual act of learning the Gemara. So there are two aspects. Let's try to crystallize the difference by giving some examples of having the Maisa Limud, the act of learning, without the Yedias HaTorah, and also conversely, could we find the case of Yedias HaTorah without the Maisa Limud? So let's start off first with the act of learning without the Yedias HaTorah. So there's a famous Gemara Menachos with one of the rabbis who said, I've learned Kol HaTorah Kulo. I've learned the entire Gemara, the entire Shas, Torah, Shabbat, everything, whatever that means exactly. It's hard to fathom how one can finish everything, but whatever that means, the person finished everything, and now he wanted to know that he still have to learn. So the Gemara says, yeah, they quote the pasuk in Yoshua, V'gisa bo yoma malayla, and you shall dwell in it day and night. So we see from here the concept where, in theory, the person's not going to get any more knowledge. There's no more Yedias HaTorah. He knows everything, yet nevertheless he's still obligated. The Maisa Limud is all the time, even without Yedias HaTorah. And then there's a second example that, let's say, and specifically by Chumash, there's a discussion we could discuss by the other Nevi'im and Ksuvim, but by Chumash anyway, everyone agrees that if you know Hebrew, and you read the parsha, you don't really understand what you're learning, you don't have any Havana, so that's an example of a Maisa Limud, the act of learning. You're actually reading the words Bereshis Bara Elokim, Ve'ela HaMishpatim, Vayikach Korach, whatever you're reading. Like some have a minhag on Tikkun Leil Shvuos among Svardim to read through all the Torah, or most of it, and they say Pi Kabbalah, even if you don't understand it now, whatever you read now, you'll acquire it later on, or at some point. But either way, so that's an example of opening up a Chumash and reading without having Havana. That's an example of a Maisa Limud without the Yedias HaTorah. In fact, there's interesting Gemara in Kiddushin which we know one is obligated to learn Torah for themselves, but they're also chayiv to teach the son. They're liable to teach, they're obligated to teach their son also. So let's say you have 5 hours to learn, or your son could learn 5 hours. Who comes first? You want to learn in the kollel, or your son wants to learn in the kollel? So the Gemara says, who kodem with no, you come before your son. However, the Gemara makes a certain caveat, unless, of course, the son is more capable. If you're just a simple balabas, you don't know how to learn that well, but you would put in the time, but your son has a great potential, he could acquire much more, and he's learning on a higher level, so then if he could acquire more Yediyas HaTorah, so therefore you should get your son. But nevertheless, again, we see the two aspects of Ma'aseh Limud and Yediyas HaTorah. What about the reverse? Could we have a case of Yediyas HaTorah? Could one acquire knowledge of Torah without actually going through an act of learning? Is that possible? I should say of a halachic act. So that, they say a katan, a child under bar mitzvah, under 13, he gets Yediyas HaTorah. However, since he's not obligated yet in the mitzvah, there's no Ma'aseh Limud. There's no halachic. Obviously, there's a Ma'aseh Limud, or else you wouldn't have Yediyas HaTorah. But halachic, we don't recognize it as an act of learning. In fact, that's what they say over. People say the Vilna Gaon. When did he learn all his science and his math? So some want to say when he was in the bathroom, that's when he read all the books. And Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky doesn't like it. He says, "What are you talking about?" They say he was sitting in the bathroom all day reading his science books. He thinks, no, you know when the Vilna Gaon learned everything? When he was a katan. When he was a minor, so therefore he had no chi of Ma'aseh Limud, and therefore he was able to study Chachmas Agayim, the science and math and other things. And there's a famous story with the Rogachover that when it was Erev Pesach, and the minhag is that in order to avoid the fast, the firstborns have to make a siyum or hear a siyum. So what happened was someone made a siyum, and they found that afterwards he was a katan. And they were wondering if the siyum was good. If the siyum counted enough as a Yediyas HaTorah, as a count for them that they could eat and have a Sudas mitzvah. So they asked the Rogachover, and the Rogachover said yes. He said because a katan has shaykhs to Yediyas HaTorah, therefore even min HaTorah, and therefore his Torah counts, and therefore it's okay that a katan made a siyum. And along these lines we find something similar by the mitzvah of Kriyas HaTorah. And by the mitzvah of Kriyas HaTorah being the Monday, Thursday, the Shabbos, the takana we have of taking out the Torah Monday, Thursday, and Shabbos. And there are two aspects of this mitzvah of Kriyas HaTorah. And in fact, the Gemara in different places, one place says Moshe instituted it, and in another place it says Ezra instituted it. So we have to reconcile. They both did, but they instituted different parts of Kriyas HaTorah. So when Moshe instituted Kriyas HaTorah, it was all about a reenactment of Maimon Har Sinai, of Kabbalas HaTorah B'tzibur. That was the enactment of Moshe Rabbeinu. That it should be a reenactment of what happened on Har Sinai. Because Moshe's original institution was only 3 psukim. And there's a discussion, what was exactly Moshe's institution? Everyone agrees it was 3 psukim, but the question was how many aliyahs was it? Was it 1 aliyah with 3 psukim? Or is it 3 aliyahs, 1 pasuk each? That's a discussion, and we'll come back to a nafkamina on it shortly, a practical difference. And then afterwards, Ezra made it longer. He made it 3 aliyahs on Sheni V'Chamishi, 7 aliyahs. Because why? Because people were saying, oh, it's not worth it. I'm going to come in for 1 pasuk, for 3 psukim. So Ezra wanted to make it, quote-unquote, more worth their while, and therefore he made a much longer Kriyas HaTorah. Not so long on Monday and Thursday because it's a working day. We'll worry about Bitul Malacha, but on Shabbos and Yontif, he instituted a much longer Kriyas HaTorah. So the purpose behind Ezra's takana, that was out Talmud Torah, that the Jewish people should be learning more Torah. So Moshe Rabbeinu's takana was a reenactment of Maimar Har Sinai. Do you remember what was done at Har Sinai? It's a Kabbalah Torah B'tzibur, and Ezra's institution was that it was the person should learn Torah. And in fact, there's an interesting discussion whether a katan could get an aliyah. So we know the minig is not to. However, strictly me'ikar adin, a katan can get an aliyah. In fact, Rav Moshe has a tshuva on it. He discusses it in a different context, in the sense that a bar mitzvah boy prepared the wrong parsha. If he prepared a later parsha, it's not an issue. But if he prepared a parsha too early, so Rav Moshe says you could give a katan one aliyah. So even though the minig is not to me'ikar adin, one can give a katan an aliyah. It's a machlokes, the me'iri and the rif. The me'iri's opinion is the gadol only has to get the first aliyah, and the next 6 could go to a katan. And the rif says no. The rif says the gadol must get 3. Some different opinion in the rif. Dafka, Kohen, Levi, Yisrael. And then the rest go to Ketanim or no, or any 3, it doesn't make a difference. But everyone agrees after the 1 and 3, you can give to anyone and there's no order. So what's the issue at hand? According to everyone, it's more than half can go to a katan. So what's the nekudas hamachlokas? What's the issue between the rif and the me'iri on whether you can give an aliyah, one aliyah, or 3, 1 or 3 to a gadol? So they explain as follows. We know that Takanas Moshe was a Kabbalah Torah B'tzibur, a reenactment of Maimar Har Sinai. So that has to do with the tzibur. Katan is not included in the tzibur. We don't count a katan as part of the minyan. So out the dinim of the tzibur, he is excluded. So that's the issue. If Moshe Rabbeinu's takana, the Meiri learned, was 3 psukim, 1 aliyah. So therefore, he says a gadol has to get 1 aliyah, and the rest is Ezra's takana of Talmud Torah, which, as we point out, applies to a katan. Therefore, he could get the next 6. And the Rif says no. Moshe's takana was 3 aliyahs. The first 3, or 3 of them, have to go to a gadol, and the rest could go to a katan. So that's why it's halacha l'maisa in terms of what exactly was the takana of Moshe, 1 aliyah, 3 aliyahs, in terms of how many aliyahs a katan to get. Usually, our minig is not to give a katan, but you have to know me'ikar adin you can, and you have to know what you can do me'ikar adin, and what is just a minig not to do. So we see these 2 aspects. There's the Maisa Limud of learning the Torah, actually sitting and reading the Gemara, the Chumash, etc. And then there's the Yediyas HaTorah, the Torah you take home with you. So which one takes precedence? Of course you should have both, but what do I mean which one takes precedence? Let's say you have 6 hours to learn. And you can learn right where you are in the Beis HaMedrash down the block. And you go in the Beis HaMedrash and you learn for 6 hours, either by yourself, chavrusa, shir. So you'll have a Maisa limit of 6 hours. Or you could go an hour away, an hour in each direction, so you're going to lose 2 hours. So you go to somewhere else where you like the Rabbi better, you like the shir, you like the chavrusa. You'll only be learning 4 hours, but in those 4 hours, you're going to accumulate more Torah in those 4 hours than you would in those 6 hours. So all the Gedolei Achronim, among the ones we mentioned, Rav Aaron Kotler, Rav Yisrael Salanter, the Shulchan Aruch, all say that Yediyas HaTorah takes precedence. Like we had the Gemara in Kedushin, who called him with no? If it's a choice between the father being in Koel or the son, the father gets it, unless, of course, the son is greater potential in Yediyas HaTorah, so therefore it goes to the son first. And therefore, when we see, that's why a person's allowed to leave Eretz Yisrael for a Rebbe, because we know that for a special Rebbe, you're allowed to, for Yediyas HaTorah, you're even allowed to leave Eretz Yisrael. And Ben Azai, in extreme case, he never got married because in his case, it would have taken away from his Yediyas HaTorah, some explain. But we see there's two aspects of Torah, the Ma'aseh Limud, as well as the Yediyas HaTorah, and you could have one without the other. You have the Ma'aseh Limud, someone who knows everything, or someone who reads without understanding. You could have the Ma'aseh Limud without the Yediyas HaTorah, and you have a Katan who could have Yediyas HaTorah without the Ma'aseh Limud. And that's the Takana of Moshe, Takanas Ezra, where a Katan's involved in Takanas Ezra about learning Torah. And that's where you could get an Aliyah, and that's why the Rav Shabbos said even a Katan can make the Siyam because he's involved, in Torah also, not just out Chinuch, the out the Torah. So how, so you always hear so there's a famous Ma'aseh with the Kutzker that someone says, I have no cheshach, I have no desire to learn Torah. So the Kutzker said, so you have to develop cheshach. In other words, let's say someone says, I don't have any appetite to eat. Okay, so either two options. Either if he doesn't develop an appetite, he's going to die from not eating, or you have to teach him how to develop an appetite. So too, spiritually, it's not an option. When no cheshach, so either learn without cheshach or develop a cheshach. How does one develop a cheshach? That we even learn from Shlomo HaMelech, the Chacham Mikol Adam, that it was his desire to learn. Like the story where when Shlomo was given a choice to become the medrash about the richest person, you want to be wealthy, you want a long life, or you want chachma. And Shlomo chose chachma, and not only chachma, but it happened right away. Why did it happen right away? Because that's at the time when you have the cheshach, the ratzon, that's when you have to pump it. You have to pump the opportunity. In fact, there's a famous joke they say over the three galachim, three priests, not the Jewish priests, not the Kohanim, and they were sitting together, the story goes, and they had this choice, this priest had. So he chose the chachma. So they see the beam coming down of light on him, and then they're sitting to hear words of wisdom. This person just got to be the smartest person, the most wisdom in the world. Let's see what his first words are. His first words are, I should have taken the $1 million. But either way, that's what we see. The chachma it's not just the chachma, it's the ratzon. You have to want to become a Torah scholar, like you call the Talmud Chacham, a student of wisdom. If you think you know it all, then there's no chance for you. But someone who has a desire to learn and wants to learn more, wants to become a Torah scholar, that's how you become. As the Gemara tells us, God gives chachma to the wise. The question is, what do you mean? God should give chachma to the unwise, to the simple people. No, it's the wise, the people who want to learn. He gives them the wisdom. So we know that a person should always strive, as we said, there's the Ma'aseh Limud, learning all the time, as well as Yediyas HaTorah. And there's a famous Iglei Tal. The Iglei Tal writes in his introduction about people have this mistaken impression about the highest level of learning. People think learning Lishma is, I learned something I really don't want to do because I get more reward for forcing myself to learn something I don't like. It's a big mistake. You don't learn Torah like you're shaking a lulav, or you're shaking a lulav because Kach Siva Hashem. You're sitting in the sukkah, you're putting on tefillin. When you learn Talmud Torah, it's different. The highest level of Torah is the geschmack of learning, the enjoyment of learning. And in fact, that's why that's how the Taz explains in Hilchos Nedarim. He explains the halacha is a moda hana mechavero. Someone makes a neder from his friend. I'm not going to get hana from you. So, and then let's say you walk into shul and your friend is the one blowing shofar. One is permitted to benefit. However, if you make a neder from your friend and that friend you want to borrow is safer, the luck is you can't get benefit. The question is, what's the difference? Talmud Torah is a mitzvah, shofar is a mitzvah. The answer is because the Gemara says, mitzvah lav lahanos mitzvah. Mitzvahs lav lahanos nitnu. Whatever it means exactly, but mitzvahs aren't for our own personal benefit. And therefore, by you hearing shofar, you're not getting the hana that we're talking about. However, the Torah says, Talmud Torah, l'hana nitnu. That's the whole purpose of Talmud Torah, the geschmack of learning, enjoying it. Hence, if you make a ned, the one is not permitted to learn from that person and use his sefer. Like the poskim write by, the lach is there are different types of shomrim. There's a shomer china, someone who watches something for nothing. You have a shomer sachar, who watches it for pay. And you have a shoel, someone who borrows. So obviously, depending on the type of shomer, there are different levels of responsibility. The one who's watching it, he's doing you a favor, he's not getting paid. So he's only liable b'pshia if he's negligent. But if it's stolen or lost, it's not his responsibility. Someone's getting paid, he's also obligated if it's in the geneva of aveda, if it's stolen or lost. And a shoel who's borrowing it, he's chayav even if accidents happen, because kol hana shalo, all the benefits are his. Even if an earthquake, something out of his control happens, since it's kol hana shalo, so therefore he's obligated. So that's the question about whether shoel, let's say he was watching a shofar, so some say in an earthquake something happened, and onus, he wouldn't be responsible. Because you can't say kol hana shalo, because mitzvah's lav lahanos ninu. However, if he's watching a sefer and he lost it, or it got lost not because of his fault, so then he'd be chayav to pay, because Talmud Torah lahanan nitnu. And that's the famous story with Rav Chaim Volozhin, or not by Rav Chaim, but they say it happened in Volozhin, where they were talking in the Beis HaMedrash, a couple of students, and they were talking about Tosas and Kedushin or something, and one of the kids forgot the Tosas and Kedushin, got so upset he ran out of the lunchroom, and he ran into the Beis HaMedrash, and he never left or whatever. He just became a tremendous master, and he became one of the Gedolim. So someone once asked, I think, Rav Chaim, like what's the story? But the person never benched. So I can't say he did the right thing by not benching, but what I could say is he never would have became if he didn't leave at that moment when he felt the cheshek, he felt he had to go out and learn because he forgot, he never would have became the person he was. So Talmud Torah, not dafka, you learn Torah because you do it for your benefit. In fact, that's the shita of the Rav, the Stipler, that Birkas HaTorah is a Birkas HaNenin. It's just like you make a bracha before you eat, before you drink, because you're getting benefit. So too, Birkas HaTorah is a Birkas HaNenin, and that's why that's the reason why we're chayev in making Birkas HaTorah. And it's like all other Birkas HaTorah, like other brachas, you have to learn right away. Right after you eat, you have to learn. And as well, you'd have to make a bracha on here, or even thinking, because you're still getting benefit as well. And also, that would explain also why women would be obligated in Birkas HaTorah, because it's like they have to make a bracha before they eat, they'd also have to make a bracha before they learn, because of all the benefit that they're getting. And to conclude, I saw an interesting question among the poskim, Rav Yashav and others, that it's not uncommon today people come to a class who are an observant, especially in a kiruv group, and you're teaching them Torah, and they haven't made a Birkas HaTorah. The lach is Kishem Hashem Ekra V'Godel Elokeinu. One has to make a Birkas HaTorah before he studies Torah. So the question is, you permitted to teach someone who you know has not made a Birkas HaTorah, because we know we have a principle with Ne'iver Lo Sitein Michshol. You don't put a stumbling block in front of the blind. So therefore, how could you teach someone Torah if you're causing him to sin? Because learning, according to this assumption anyway, learning Torah without the Birkas HaTorah is an Aveira. And just like the Ramah writes, also lahachel pas l'mishalo yitol natilo shadayim. You're not allowed to give someone bread if you know he's not going to wash, or you can't give someone food because he's not going to make a bracha. It's all with neiver. Why don't you say the same thing here? So there are answers there also, but Rav Yashav says here, Kevin she'ein hashameya mischaven l'shem mitzvahs Talmud Torah. Since the onlooker doesn't have the kavana that he's doing it l'shem Talmud Torah, Eino mechuyu levarach. He's not obligated. If you don't have kavanah to learn for the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, so Rabbi Yashav claims that one is not obligated in Birkas Torah, and therefore it's not a problem. So what do you do? So again, this is assuming, if you assume it's a Birkas Shevach, so maybe you wouldn't have to, but this is assuming it's a Birkas HaMitzvah, Birkas Torah, as we've discussed in previous classes. So is this so simple? Rabbi Yashav writes that there's no Talmud Torah if you don't have kavanah, because the Kashas, the Magen Avram, and others seem to point out that you don't need kavanah for the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. It gets into the whole issue of whether mitzvah strichas kavanah. There's a discussion in many Gemaras in Brachas and Rosh Hashanah whether mitzvah strichas kavanah or not. Do mitzvahs require intent? Do you mean, does someone say that I'm about to put on tefillin, don't have kavanah? No, of course not. The machlokas is post facto. If you did the mitzvah without the requisite kavanah, do you still get the mitzvah or not? So that's a machlokas in the Gemara, in the Rishonim, etc. A whole discussion in the Rambam Shita. So we normally pass into the psak of the Magen Avram, the Mishnah or others, is we make a distinction. By a mitzvah deraisa, we pass a mitzvah strichas kavanah. By a mitzvah derabanan, we say mitzvahs eino strichas kavanah. So, Talmud Torah is a mitzvah min Torah, so pashas mitzvah strichas kavanah like a Rabbi Yashav. However, that's not so simple, because we've discussed the Minchas Chinuch and others, the Ragachover, and many others who discuss there's two different types of mitzvahs. There's a mitzvah, the Maisa mitzvah, when the mitzvah is the act, and then there's the mitzvah where it's result oriented. So that's how the Arzarua, the Marach Azur writes, that's the definition of which mitzvahs require shlichus or not. If the Torah requires you to do the act, you can't have a shlich, you have to do it. But if the Torah only cares about the result, so it's okay to have a shliach. So as we just gave a whole shir, that it's true, Talmud Torah is a Maisa Limud, but it's also result-oriented, the Dias HaTorah. So if it's result-oriented, so then we assume mitzvahs ain't tzrichas kavanah. So therefore, we're back to the problem then, teaching Torah to someone who's not going to make a Birkas Torah. So perhaps it's a problem, maybe it's not, because they have the Maisa Limud. But as Rav Asher Weiss and others point out, that even if you assume that there's an Isser, there's a prohibition to learn Torah without a bracha, let's not confuse the Iker with the Tafel. You can't confuse the primary with the secondary. It's true also, does that mean if I'm not going to make a bracha, therefore I shouldn't put on tefillin? No. Of course you should make a bracha before you put on tefillin. But if you make, it's more important to put on tefillin without a bracha than not to put on tefillin at all. And so that's what they point out here. It's true, maybe you are over something by not learning without a Birkas Torah. But let's not confuse the Tafel with the Iker. No one would say, don't learn 3 hours because you didn't make let's say you don't have a sitter, you don't learn the bracha by heart. So then, most would say then you don't confuse the Iker with the Tafel. And therefore you don't make a bracha. But of course we all know the importance of making a bracha by Birkas Torah. The Gemara tells us in the Darim, Alma Nev Da'aretz, why was the land destroyed? Why was the Churban Abayis? Shelo Baruchu Bracha Tchila. They didn't make a bracha before they learned Torah. And as the Rosh and the Ran explained, Rabbeinu Yonah, that they weren't machshiv Torah. They didn't think Torah deserved the bracha. And we know, even though people make too much out of a bracha, but a bracha is a good indicator. That's why, as Rav Soloveitchik always likes to say, the Torah concludes, the Gemara concludes, we should sit in the sukkah on Shmini Atzeret without a bracha. So what happens? You tell someone not to make a bracha, then mizalzel, they don't sit in the sukkah anymore. That's why Rav Moshe, even by tefillin, that there were cases where they had to wake up in early evening, early morning, even it wasn't morning yet, and Rav Moshe Paskin in Russia, better they make a bracha, because really Minat Torah Laila Isman Tefillin, because you don't want someone going around not making a bracha, because in them one they'll end up not putting on tefillin. Even though, but it's wrong that a lot of people confuse the ikar with the tafel. They think if they're not making the bracha, they're not doing the mitzvah. However, that's not correct. One should still learn without doing it. In fact, there was someone who said, well, if you can't drink before learning, he heard a share that you can't have a drink before learning, before davening, you can't. So therefore he said, so he gave up. He used to learn for an hour before davening, so he decided not to learn anymore. So again, he's missing up the ikar and the tafel, because number one, there are many poskim who say you can have a drink. They discuss coffee with sugar, without, but you always have to keep perspective. And it's, of course, it's important to make the bracha, but in a case where the choice is no Torah versus a bracha, so then many say don't confuse the ikar with the tafel. One should continue learning even if they didn't make the bracha. And that's why, and as we see the importance, however, the ideal is that one should learn with the proper kavanah, and that's why making the bracha first, Birchas HaTorah, and then learning. That's the different aspects of Talmud Torah. We see that perhaps even if someone doesn't have the kavanah to learn, nevertheless, you still get the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, because out the ma'aseh limud you might not, but maybe that's another example. We could have a ma'aseh limud, you could have no ma'aseh limud without yedias HaTorah. The example here, that someone who doesn't have the kavanah for Talmud Torah yet gets the yedias HaTorah. So let's just summarize. We talked about the different aspects of Talmud Torah. There's the ma'aseh limud, there's yedias HaTorah. We have the case of the Gemara B'Nacha, someone who knows everything and still has to learn. You have the ma'aseh limud, or someone who just reads a chumash without havana. On the other hand, we had a katan who doesn't have a ma'aseh limud, but he can go ahead and get the yedias HaTorah, and therefore he could get an aliyah, he can make a siyam, etc. And we have also this other example where a person who has in mind doesn't have kavanah to fulfill the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, yet gets yedias HaTorah. And that's how we have to remember that the Igli Tal says the purpose of Talmud Torah is different than all the many other mitzvahs. Many other mitzvahs we do because Kach Siva Hashem, and we do also Talmud Torah that way. But we have to in mind the highest level of Talmud Torah is the geschmack of learning, and the whole purpose of Limud Torah is to enjoy it. As they say, Avram never would have made it. Lech lecha. If you thought he was doing it just because I had to do it, you'd never be successful. As the Vilna Gaon says, to be successful in learning, you have to want to do it. It can't just be because I have to do it. But by Talmud Torah, it can't just be because you have to. It has to be, you need the cheshek, you need the ratzon, like a Talmud Chacham. You always have to feel there's more to learning, then there's more to do. And always remember to make the Birchas HaTorah and have the proper kavanah before one studies